Ted Cruz scores a big win in Wisconsin.
And together, we will beat Hillary Clinton in November.
Hear how he's closing the gap with Donald Trump. David Daleidens' home raided, the fallout from his undercover Planned Parenthood investigation. Religious freedom beyond the U.S., the struggle for Christians overseas to live out their faith. And the Pope blesses a little girl who's going blind. Her parents share their faith in a miracle. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, April 6th, 2016.
Tonight is a turning point. It is a rallying cry. It is a call from the hardworking men and women of Wisconsin to the people of America.
Senator Ted Cruz tops Donald Trump by double digits. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick. We're following a turn of events in the presidential race. Jason Calvi will explain the role religion plays. But first, from our political desk, Lauren Ashburn has the Wisconsin primary results. Lauren?
Ryan, primary day in the Badger State, and the underdogs upset frontrunners in both parties. On the Republican side, pre-primary polls accurately predicted the results. Cruz took the state with 48% to Trump's 35% and Kasich's 14%.
Hillary, get ready. Here we come.
Ted Cruz pulling off a big win in Wisconsin's Republican primary. The victory for Cruz is narrowing Donald Trump's path to the nomination and moving the party closer to a contested convention. Cruz's win is the most substantial since his defeat of Trump in Iowa.
3 weeks ago, the media said Wisconsin was a perfect state for Donald Trump. But the hard-working men and women of Wisconsin stood and campaigned tirelessly to make sure that tonight was a victory for every American.
Trump is now facing a nearly impossible mathematical challenge to amass the 1,237 delegates needed to capture the nomination. It comes after a rough week of political blunders, attack ads, and questions about his ability to be presidential. It's loosened the frontrunner's grip as the presumptive nominee. Former presidential candidate Lindsey Graham, who reluctantly backed Cruz, tweeting, "Well done, Ted Cruz. Hopefully tonight is the turning point to deny Donald Trump 1,237 delegates." Trump's campaign mostly silent after his loss, only releasing a biting statement against Cruz, saying in part, "Lion Ted Cruz had the governor of Wisconsin, many conservative talk radio show hosts, and the entire party apparatus behind him." He went on to say Ted Cruz is worse than a puppet. He is a Trojan horse being used by the party bosses attempting to steal the nomination from Mr. Trump. Cruz, meanwhile, celebrated his big win.
My wife, Heidi.
He ensured she shared the spotlight after Trump retweeted an unflattering photo of her last week, which he later acknowledged was a mistake.
I may be biased, but isn't she going to make an amazing First Lady?
On the Democratic side, Bernie Sanders beat Hillary Clinton in Wisconsin 56 to 43%. He says momentum is shifting in his favor since he's won 6 out of the last 7 primaries and caucuses. But Clinton says, well, he's making empty campaign promises.
I think that a lot of these super delegates are going to be looking around them and that are going to be saying, which candidate has the momentum?
Some of his ideas just won't work because the numbers don't add up. Others won't even pass Congress, or they rely on Republican governors suddenly having a conversion experience and becoming progressives.
The candidates are focused on winning the April 19th primary in New York State. Polls say New Yorkers, Clinton and Trump, are on track to win. Let's take a look at the delegate totals. On the Republican side, Trump has reached 743 out of that 1,237 needed. Cruz has 517 and Kasich 143. On the Democrat side, they need 2,383. Clinton has 1,748 to Sanders 1,058. Now, the Wisconsin exit polls are finding a majority of Republican voters say they're either scared or concerned about a potential Trump presidency. Jason Calvi has been looking at the numbers in Wisconsin. Jason, what do they say about Christian voters?
Well, if you look at the CNN exit polls, you'll find that Senator Ted Cruz won 55% of the evangelical vote to Donald Trump's 34 and John Kasich's 10. And surely Ted Cruz had the backing of many Protestant leaders.
Catholic schools and Jewish day schools, Brigham Young and the Little Sisters of the Poor will see a Supreme Court that protects their religious liberty.
Ted's tough talk helped him cruise with Wisconsin evangelicals.
I think Christians have a unique ability to understand that those aren't just, quote, social issues. Those are foundational issues to the well-being of our country.
Jelaine Appling leads the Wisconsin Family Action PAC. She and more than 100 faith leaders endorsed Cruz this past week.
We believe that there really wasn't another choice when we looked at what his core beliefs are, where he stands on issues related to the traditional family and certainly marriage, the sanctity of human life, and the protection of religious freedom.
A pro-life leader and Miss America semifinalist Dr. Day Gardner backs Donald Trump.
He said that he's pro-life. I remember saying that I was very pro-life, that I had been pro-life, I believed it. I didn't have all the facts, though. I didn't have all the information. I thought, uh-oh, he's right where I was.
Gardner says she thinks Trump will stick with his pro-life promises. The attacks against Trump have led Gardner to jump in with her first presidential endorsement.
We need someone else who is not an establishment politician like the many that we've seen come before who said, vote for me. And they've come in, they've won office. We've seen them come and go, and we see everything exactly the same as it was before or worse.
Now, on the other hand, though, the day before Wisconsin voted, National Right to Life came out and endorsed Senator Ted Cruz. They say he has a 100% pro-life voting record, Lauren.
We saw Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin off to Cruz's right there. How has he been important in shaping Ted Cruz's victory?
He's been at those rallies, those huge rallies, the rock star entrance for Ted Cruz and Governor Scott Walker. Some have been throwing out his name as a possible vice presidential candidate moving forward. He has 83% favorability amongst Wisconsin Republicans, which is a huge number, and Cruz has definitely been taking some of that and using it there in the state. And if they can win Wisconsin in the fall, that'll be the first time in 32 years.
Right, and they said something last night, Cruz did, as he was wrapping up, about turning the Badger State red or something, whatever their state color is. They're very excited about doing that. Jason Calvi, thank you so much for your report. We will have more political coverage coming up. Georgetown University's John Carr will join us with a Catholic perspective right here at the Political Desk. Brian.
Thank you, Lauren Ashburn. Meanwhile, other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Pro-life activist David Daleiden says California Department of Justice agents raided his Orange County home on Tuesday. Daleiden posted on Facebook that the agents seized video footage from his apartment along with his personal information. He says they left behind documents that could implicate Planned Parenthood in illegal behavior related to the sale of aborted baby parts. California Attorney General Kamala Harris, a Democrat running for the U.S. Senate, isn't commenting on what she says is an ongoing investigation. Daleiden suggests the raid was politically motivated because Harris has accepted campaign contributions from Planned Parenthood. Daleiden, who faces related charges in Texas, says, quote, "We will pursue all remedies to vindicate our First Amendment rights." The Pakistani army claims it's leading an operation to kill terrorists responsible for the Easter Sunday suicide bombing targeting Christians. Wyatt Goolsby is here with more.
Brian, Pakistan's military is saying all the right things. They say they have zero tolerance for extremists, but many are skeptical the military can destroy the terrorist network, which targets religious minorities.
Life of religious minorities, especially Christians and believers, are miserable in Pakistan.
Pervez Rafiq says in his native Pakistan, there is no religious liberty. He says Catholics like himself and other religious minorities are targeted by radical groups and harsh laws.
Religious minorities have been discriminated, disgraced by the Constitution. We are treated as a second and third class citizen in Pakistan.
Rafiq is in Washington to raise awareness less than 2 weeks after a suicide bombing in Lahore killed 72 people on Easter. Many of the victims were Christians. prejudice against Christians is not limited to terrorists. Last month, demonstrators in Pakistan called for Islamic law, expressing support for a policeman who shot a politician for defending a Christian woman accused of blasphemy.
It's there in Al-Qaeda, it's there in al-Nusra, Al-Shabaab, the Taliban, Boko Haram. They are all centered on this idea that we have to defend our religion with violence.
Dr. Thomas Farr, a professor at Georgetown University and longtime religious freedom advocate, says more should be done by the U.S. to help minorities who are persecuted. He says the Catholic Church can play a bigger role.
I believe the Holy See should be involved in this, in creating a situation where not only can they survive, but they can live into the future, and the stakes are really high.
One of the biggest problems in Pakistan is corruption in the government. The Pakistan military is reportedly linked to terrorists. That makes many people skeptical they will be able to root out the problem. Brian.
Thanks, Wyatt Goolsby. And a moving story from the Vatican tonight. The parents of a 5-year-old Ohio girl who is losing her sight pray for a miracle as Pope Francis blesses her eyes today. Lizzie Myers and her family had special seats for today's general audience. Her mom says Pope Francis spent several intimate minutes with her.
He blessed Elizabeth's eyes. He asked that we pray for him and said he will be praying for us.
The Pope caressed and hugged the 5-year-old who doesn't know she suffers from Usher syndrome. Her parents haven't told her yet that she'll eventually lose her hearing and sight.
She's a worrier, and I don't want her to sit and worry about it. I want her to live as normal of a life as she can, now. There will come a time when we'll have to tell her. I dread that day, but right now we just don't feel that it's necessary for her to know. I think it will hold her back.
Lizzie's father, Steve Myers, says he was really nervous, but that changed as Francis approached.
As soon as Pope Francis came up to where Lizzie was, a calm came over me. I don't even know how to explain it.
Lizzie's parents now pray for a miracle, believing it's possible, having already experienced miraculous moments.
We came here again hoping for some amazing memories for Lizzie, something that she'll remember when things change for her. But what we got was, I think, we've seen several miracles.
Mary Shovlain is joining us from Rome. Mary, you talked with Lizzie's parents. It sounds like we could learn something from them about having faith in miracles.
Good evening, Brian. That's right. They came here, of course, hoping for a complete miracle, complete healing for their daughter, Lizzie, who is about to go blind and deaf in the coming years. They said they've already witnessed so many miracles, just the generosity of so many people have welcomed them and made this trip possible. But as parents suffering over their suffering child, they are, of course, hoping for the fullness of God's grace and a full recovery for Lizzie.
Well, what a moving experience with the Holy Father today. What is next for this family?
We asked them what was next on the bucket list for Lizzie, and they said it's actually a lot of normal things, nothing on this grand a scale. They're going to go visit the natural parks in the United States. They said the first stop is Wyoming. After that, it's catching fireflies. It's having bonfires in the backyard and flying kites, anything and everything they can do to let her see as much as possible.
And finally, tell us about the new catechetical direction the Holy Father is taking with these Wednesday audiences.
Well, if you've been following the catechesis since the Jubilee began, we've been rooted in mercy in the Old Testament. Today, Pope Francis took us into the New Testament, where mercy becomes incarnate in Jesus Christ. And it was nice to see Pope Francis touching little Lizzie's eyes today, that mercy incarnate. Just as he spoke about Jesus, he said every act in Christ's life incarnated God's mercy, so we should not be afraid to recognize ourselves as sinners and put ourselves at the feet of that mercy.
Powerful. Thank you, Mary Shovlain, reporting from Rome.
Thank you.
Coming up, what happened to family-friendly TV? Popular shows and their ratings face criticism. And we return to presidential politics, how the race for the White House is changing. As Mary Shovlain mentioned, Pope Francis begins a new chapter in his catechesis on mercy at today's public audience. He's now focusing specifically on Christ's fulfillment of the promise of mercy. Francis says the Gospels show us a Jesus who in every moment of his earthly life made mercy visible. Thank you for joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Wednesday. I'm Brian Patrick. A new study says the TV rating system does not protect children from graphic content. Catherine Szeltner looks at how parents can respond.
When browsing through the growing entertainment options on TV or online, one group says families can't trust rating labels.
The problem is that the labels are not accurate. They're not consistent.
Parents Television Council looked at 20 years of TV programming and ratings. The new study claims primetime family programs no longer exist.
By 2015, there were zero hours of G-rated programming.
The group's program director says the rating system is flawed because no third party holds networks accountable.
The industry is basically monitoring itself. It's them playing sheriff in their own town, and then they're also playing judge in their own town.
The report gives this example of a wrong rating. Both Disney's recent Cinderella film and ABC's controversial The Real O'Neills have a PG label.
With rising concerns over ratings, should parents just turn the TV off?
I'm still not going to say this group of strangers 3,000 miles away has determined this is right for my child.
Catholic mother Tamara McFerrin isn't surprised by rating system flaws. With a 6-year-old girl at home, she turns to her trusted community for guidance.
Who are those people in your life whom you trust? Who are those other parents to bounce those ideas off of? Have you seen this movie for your child? What do you think? Did it bother your child?
Whether G, PG, or something else, it's ultimately up to parents to decide on the viewing values for their home. Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. The head of the Transportation Security Administration urges vigilance to guard against terror attacks. Peter Neffinger was actually in the Brussels airport when it was bombed last month.
Being there on that day, seeing the devastation, seeing the chaos of the airport environment and the evil behind it was a stark reminder of the importance of the work that we do at TSA every day to protect travelers.
Neffinger testified before a Senate committee today. He says the TSA is hiring more workers to protect airports ahead of the busy summer travel season. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley criticizes Chief Justice John Roberts and other justices for being too political. It's the latest round in the battle over filling the seat of the late Justice Antonin Scalia. Meanwhile, Democratic senators attack Republican leadership for refusing to give President Obama's nominee a hearing.
But to deny him an opportunity to even be heard, an opportunity to defend himself if there are any charges, that is fundamentally unfair.
Republican leaders believe the next president should nominate a successor to the late Justice Scalia. A handful of Republican senators are pushing back, saying Judge Garland deserves a hearing. The political rancor this election year has reached a fevered pitch. Lauren Ashburn is at our political desk covering the road to the White House.
Brian, the no-holds-barred rhetoric is standard fare in this campaign. The looming question, based on Cruz's win last night, has the negative campaigning turned off voters? Joining us is John Carr. He's the director of the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life at Georgetown University. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Lauren.
You wrote in America Magazine, you're their Washington correspondent, that candidates and voters need to change their behavior. Why would they need to change their behavior?
It's demoralizing. You can't even let your kids watch the debate. It was only 6 months ago that Pope Francis was in the Congress over here saying that politics was a vocation and that it's about human dignity and the common good. Well, this campaign has been about everything but human dignity and the common good.
Absolutely. What do you think that their behavior should be? Is there a model that we can look to? Obviously, the Pope is a great model.
Well, it is. I guess the one thing I would say is what we need is not to run away from politics. We need to get more involved. One of the things the Pope said, our bishops have said, it may be the most countercultural thing our church teaches, is that politics is a good thing. And it's a moral obligation. So more of us ought to get involved. We ought to run for office. We ought to hold candidates accountable.
Sure. What would that do?
Well, if we got involved and stood up for what we believed, frankly, we'd have better choices. How did we end up with, people will disagree with this, the 3 leading candidates for president, according to the polls, are the least trustworthy people who ran? I mean, what happened? There were 20 people running. This is what we have left.
Well, raises an interesting point because you said in your article that religious leaders seem to be invisible and almost irrelevant in this election.
A friend of mine said anger trumps religion. And I think, frankly, our anger has gotten in the way of our souls here. I look at politics as a way to defend human life and dignity, to care for the least of these. This isn't about this. This is about name-calling. The Democrats are arguing about who loves Planned Parenthood more. The Republicans are talking about who can deport more people faster. This is not what the Pope talked about. This is not what our faith calls us to do.
And yet, it's exactly what we see play out every single day on television in the campaign trail. John, quickly tell me about the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life. That's a mouthful, by the way.
Well, we had a contest for the most boring name. And the Initiative on Catholic Social Thought and Public Life won. But it is. We bring people together to look at how our faith can shape what we do in public life. We work with young people. We work with people here in Washington to remind them that our faith can be an asset in public life.
Well, it certainly can. And I love what you said, anger's gotten in the way of our souls. Thank you so much, John Carr from Georgetown University, for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Up next, Alabama pays tribute to Mother Angelica, how the state legislature honors her legacy. And a moving embrace at the Vatican, we take another look at the Pope's special guest. Her whole life was a gift from God to the world, and what is left to us to enjoy in this time of grief is the fruits of a life surrendered to God and His Church. Thoughts on Mother Angelica from Father Martin Bernal of the Episcopal Conference of Argentina. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. The Alabama State Legislature observes a moment of silence as a resolution passes unanimously honoring EWTN's late foundress, Mother Angelica. Hanceville Mayor Kenneth Nail is joining us from EWTN's Alabama headquarters. Mayor Nail, you were there in Montgomery when the resolution passed. Describe the scene.
Yes, you know, typically Montgomery is very chaotic, and yesterday with all that's going on in Montgomery it was chaotic. But when Representative Randall Shedd came to the podium and read his resolution, and it just got very quiet, and people paid attention, and they called for a moment for Mother, and that's the quietest I've ever heard it, and I've been in the State House many times. But it was very quiet, and several members of the legislature came up with Representative Shedd to stand to show appreciation and to honor her yesterday.
And then the chaos resumed, of course. You met Mother in the 90s when she was scouting a site for her monastery. What was it about your city, your little city of Hanceville, that attracted her?
You know, it's a very unique place. It's kind of one way in and one way out between two rivers. It's really beautiful. At the time, there was a lot of farmland there. And I think, and you know, she stopped in several stores, and the people in Hanceville are really nice, and they welcomed her with open arms. And I said, Mother, I'm going to pray that the Lord sends you back to Hanceville. And apparently the Lord did send her back to Hanceville, and we were so glad that she came and built the shrine there.
Mayor Nail, is your little town ready for a new surge of pilgrims now that Mother has passed on and so many more people are hearing about her? There will be crowds coming there to Hanceville. How will you guys handle that?
Well, you know, we are small, and we do have limited resources. You know, unlike the Mass of the Day that we had been planning for 7 years, or probably over 5 years. But yes, we're ready for it, and we're going to continue to be nice to folks and welcome people in, and we sure want them to come to Hanceville, and we'll be glad to see them there.
Well, Mother and her monastery and the shrine have put Hanceville on the map, and we really appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to be with us on EWTN News Nightly. Hanceville Mayor Kenneth Nail, thank you.
Thank you.
And country music legend Merle Haggard dies on his 79th birthday today.
Beholding you tonight.
Haggard recorded more than 36 #1 hits in his decades-long career. He's best known for songs like Okie from Muskogee and The Fightin' Side of Me. He suffered complications from a long bout with pneumonia. Merle Haggard was a masterful guitarist, fiddler, and songwriter, as well as singer. Until tomorrow, for our EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We leave you revisiting today's general audience and the powerful encounter between Pope Francis and 5-year-old Lizzie Myers. Good night.